Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans. For all of our first time visitors, welcome, and I hope to see you around a lot more often. As you'll soon discover, this place is all about finding the coolest, most interesting, and best looking locations in the sim, with the hope that you might like to fly them for yourself. And even if you've been to some of these areas before, I'm going to tell you a whole lot more about them as we fly along, so the next time you're out here, it will be all the more fun and engaging. So today we're back in Norway, and yes, we're finally going to do the fjords, some of them anyway. And the trouble with this area for us on this channel is that there just isn't all that much to talk about other than the fjords. So I picked a route that I felt covered enough natural beauty and crossed over enough population areas to have some interesting things to learn about, and I'll give you a preview of that before we get going. And as you can see, today we're going to be flying a Norwegian Air Force Transall C-160, and if you can believe it, I had enough self-control to wait until last week to buy this thing. I was hoping it would go on sale, which it never did. But it has all the right specs for some of our longer trips, so I figured I'd go ahead and take the plunge. And it turns out everybody was right. It is a pretty cool plane. I've got a couple of minor little issues with it that I'll mention kind of as we go along. This is not a review channel, so I'm not going to do a full rehash of my opinions about it. And I'm not going to do a full tutorial on how it works. So you can hear the APU is already running. The startup procedure can be fairly lengthy, so I've got it up to the point where we're just about ready to start the engine. So we'll go ahead and do that just for the sake of time. Turn our APU bleed on, turn all of these 8 fuel pumps on. And then you just have to turn the main starter on, and a lot of these are those 3-position switches, which can be very finicky to try to manipulate with your mouse. And this is the starter here, so we'll get the left engine going. And this is very unique for a turbo prop, kind of like that Mitsubishi plane, which is also very unique. This doesn't have any prop controls. So all you have is your condition lever here, and then the power levers, which are back here. And then these things, which I've never seen before. So these are called, I think, idle condition levers, and once the engine gets up and running, you just slide it forward and then you don't touch it again until you're done. So all you really have to worry about once you get the condition levers up is just controlling the power setting. So we're just waiting for these to hit 2,000 RPMs, which it did, so now we can go to condition lever low, and then once it gets to 3,500, which it will do really quickly, then we slide these up to the full setting. And then once that light extinguishes, we can shut down that starter, and then we'll get going on the next one. But I think it'll probably start even if we go ahead and start it now, so we'll just go ahead and do that for the sake of time. And when I was watching the tutorials for this, like a lot of other planes, they were all over the place as far as the sequence goes, and I found in this one that it doesn't seem to matter all that much if you follow it precisely, but the steps I'm following, at least from the phase that we started at, is what was actually in the manual. And it works, so I'm going with it. Alright, just get that one up to 2,000. I'll slide that condition up, get our generators going, turn the APU off, and we'll be on our way. So this is an AzurPoly plane, and the only other one that I can think that we've flown recently was the one that we took in that Israel-Gaza flight, which was that little microjet. And if you saw that trip, I was complaining that if I jumped out to adjust any of the settings in the sim, the sound or controls or anything, and I came back in, it would shut the engines off. And this one's doing the same thing. And so that has only happened to me in 2 AzurPoly planes, so I don't know if they have a coding issue or if it's user error, which is very likely. But the only 2 planes that's done it in have been AzurPoly, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. And it's a little bit frustrating, especially when you're flying at 5,000 feet and all of a sudden the engine's shut off when you're just trying to change the time of day or something. Alright, so all that's good. Turn the main starter off, and let's get up here and turn the main generators on. We'll get the APU shut down and we'll be on our way. 2, 3, 4, APU generator off. Jump back down here. Turn off the APU, and just let me show you real quick, as I've been doing for our last couple of flights, just a general overview of where we're going, just so you know where in the world we are and what we're going to check out. So here's southern Norway, and if you saw our other flight, we left from outside of Oslo here, came down here by Drammen, out to Kongsberg, and came all the way around here and landed down here. So now we're taking off from just south of Stavanger at an airport, let me zoom in a little bit here. So our airport is right here at Solekrossen. So we're going to come out over the Atlantic here for just a little bit, turn around, check out the town of Sandnes, cruise up this fjord, check out some islands up here, and then come into this big, long, straight, cut up this way, and fly up over here. And there's not a lot of population out here, so we'll be doing a lot of scenery enjoying, and I've got some other interesting, just general tidbits about Norway to share with you guys. And then we'll come up here, cross over this way, come around the top of Bergen. There's some really nice bridges up here, and the town of Bergen is beautiful, and then land at the airport, which is somewhere probably in this vicinity here. So that's what's going on. And the sim says this flight should be about 35 minutes, so it won't be all that long, and this plane gets going pretty quick. And you know what? It looks like this window opens, and I didn't try that before, so does it change the sound? Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, that's really loud. Holy crap. Boy, that sounds good, but it's really loud. All right, if we play our cards right, all of the lights for Bergen should be turning on when we get up there, which is just going to look spectacular. All right, parking brake off. Watch out, buddy. I would go back and take the taxiway around, but I've seen videos of this thing landing on the snow in Antarctica, so I think it'll probably be okay if we cut through this little pass right here. That'll save us about 2 minutes of driving around the airport. Hope that guy back there didn't tell on us. And Chet was sitting over there a minute ago, and he just disappeared, so I don't know what happened to him. He's probably hanging out in the back. And I don't know if you saw it from the outside, but there are some little portal windows, and there's 1 or 2 spots we're going to want to check out from the right side of the plane. So I did put a camera back there too. We may hop back there for a few minutes. And this thing moves right along, even in low idle. All right, I'm going to stop here for a sec, just to take care of a couple more pre-takeoff checks. So we need to turn our hydraulic pump on, landing lights on, and then we got here, let me turn this, I got my little note cards out here, and 1 notch of flaps, switch our nav over to GPS, so you can switch over to a 430, which you can see we have up there. Oh, sorry, I leaned away from the mic. So we're going to be taking this on GPS. And they said they have retrofitted a lot of these planes. These are old planes. They've been around for a while. I'll tell you more about them later. But they said they have put a lot of GPS systems in them now. So that is probably true to life. All right, condition lever's high. And we got our FMC on, although we don't need it because we're going to be using our Garmin. And I pulled the trim back 1 degree because it felt a little bit nose heavy when we were taking off. So that should probably help out with that a little bit. All right, let's get moving. So I adjusted the weather. It was beautiful. The live weather here was beautiful. There wasn't any snow on the ground, which they don't really get a lot of snow out here. It's kind of like Vancouver. It's too close to the ocean to get really cold enough for a lot of snow. Beautiful here, a bit windy, but I checked the live weather radar up by Bergen, and right now they're having a sleet storm up there, so we wouldn't be able to see it, and that's going to be the best part of this flight as far as ground scenery goes. So I just put one of these snowscapes on, which you can tell looks beautiful. All right, so here we go. We'll just do a rolling start because we have a nice long runway. And our cruising altitude for this flight will be 5,000 feet, which may seem a little low for a big guy like this, but this thing is made to fly low. Lots of cargo dropping. They do a lot of firebombing with this thing for wildfires, so I think it can probably handle it. And it rattles like crazy. I love the ambient sounds when they're added to a plane. All right, we're at our rotate speed, so up we go. I do have several add-ons in this flight, maybe 4 or 5 of them. And I'm including one that I did not add to this actual flight. It's for the airport up in Bergen, but this plane is very, very heavy on performance. I had to turn a lot of the settings down, and I didn't want it to, with that add-on in, it was getting down in the 20s for the frame rate, so I didn't want to mess with that any further. Gear up, flaps up, and I'm going to try to get to about 1,000 feet a minute of climb rate because it'll automatically lock onto our vertical speed when I hit the nav. Autopilot on, vertical speed hold, and we're good. So if you're feeling like it feels a little bit dark, I'll encourage you to go into a dark room or watch this at night because you're going to want to see this with all the city lights coming on. It looks beautiful. And once we get turned around, we're kind of staring at the sun now, so everything looks a little bit darker. Once we get turned around, we'll see a lot of the landscape. And because this flight's going to be under 40 minutes, it should still be enough ambient sunlight to be able to see a lot of the structures and their lights once we get to Bergen. And one of the add-ons did, 2 of the add-ons did a lot of touch-ups for Bergen, and there's already a few in-sim points of interest that have been modded down there. Some bridges are going to look great. So just throw all the stuff in. You may want to leave that airport out, or you're going to have some issues with performance. All right, after takeoff checklist. We got our gears up, we got our flaps up, landing lights off, get the AC bleeds on because it's probably a little bit chilly in here. And then our prop sync on. And that's it. So I'm going to try to keep it under 250 knots, which shouldn't be a problem even with the throttles wide open because it's going to kind of stabilize there, but we're not going to be up over 10,000 feet. Although I don't know if they have that same regulation out here in Europe as they do in the US, but I think it's going to stop at 250 knots anyway. So that should be good, and one less thing we have to fiddle with. These are going to be all autogen buildings, but a lot of them are farmland, and we're going to be 5,000 feet in the air, so nothing's going to really jump out at you out of place. It's going to look pretty good. There's also some mesh packs available for the mountains out here that I think went down to 10 meters, but some of the comments, which would have made them a little more jagged, you're going to see they're kind of rounded off. But some of the commenters were saying that it also had a frame rate hit, and I couldn't afford any more of that with this plane, so I left that out as well. But if you search for Norway at flightsim.to, you'll see those in there. And you know what I found out about FlightSim? I always search for anything near any of the areas that were flying around, but when I was adding one of the airports, in the description of that airport, they said, hey, be sure to also include these packs for Bergen. And even though in the title of the add-on it said Norway, they were not showing up when I searched for Norway, which made me wonder just how many other places might be hiding in there that don't pull up when you search for a name that's in the title. And those really made this trip, I think. And I never would have known about them had I not found that airport add-on, which is the one that's not included. So I included all the ones that I have added, which you will not find all those if you just search for Norway. Alright, so stretching out to our north up there, around along this side right here, is something called the Stravanger Peninsula, named after the city we'll soon see on the other end of it. And this long stretch of water that makes it a peninsula is called the Fjord. And on the southernmost tip of it right here is the city of Sandnes, which along with other little towns between here and the big city form a new vocabulary word for us, a conurbation, which is what happens as all these little towns grow into one continuous area of dense population. And I'm not sure why, but I really like saying that word. I bet Chet could figure it out if he was here. Look at those fields down there. They look good. Real good. Yeah, see these mountains? They're probably more rounded like this here. But on my initial flight, which I'll tell you about, which is different than this route, we flew over some really big mountains, and they were still kind of rounded off too, which is always a bummer. Europe just didn't get any love in the mountain ranges. The Alps don't look all that great. Out here doesn't look all that great, but everything else looks beautiful. Even though this is autogen, you can tell because everything's rectangular. It's believable. And the fields look phenomenal. Water lines look pretty good. And you're going to see a lot of these two steeple old churches, and I looked for all of them to see if there was really a church like that down there, and there weren't any. They've got some old churches out here, but none of them are the big steeple type. So Sandnes out here was incorporated in 1860 on the site of an old farm, which used to be right where downtown is today, and you can see it's mostly industrial down there now. And then up ahead we're going to see a big semicircular port, which is this area right here. And just south of that, on the southern edge of that port, is a huge stadium that was built in 2004, and that's the home of the local football club called the Vikings, naturally. And just south of that is the town of Gausel, which is pretty built up now. But apparently that was also all farmland until the 1980s, so they built up a lot of this fairly recently. And there's the stadium right there. It's got a white shade area on it, which is kind of blending in with the snow, and then there's snow in the field too, so if I wasn't pointing it out to you, you might not spot it, but that is an in-sim mod too. Not really phenomenal because it's just a stadium and it's blending in with the rest of the scenery. But in 1883, down at that town, they discovered a roughly 1,000-year-old grave of a wealthy Viking woman who had so many fancy grave goods planted with her that they called it the Queen's Grave. They said there are about 40 objects in all, which can now be viewed up at the Bergen Museum near our destination, if you're traveling through the area. And in the 1990s, some archaeologists started poking around down there and found a whole settlement complete with a few boat graves, which is awesome. Alright, this area here is Stavanger, big city. And that was founded in 1125, the same year they completed Norway's oldest cathedral, which is still standing down there. And it took them only 150 years to build it, which might be a record for that time period. And that city experienced an economic boom as a big fish canning center in the mid-1900s, with over half the city stuffing tins at more than 50 local stufferys. But these days, most of the cans moving down there are barrels of crude, earning it the title of Norway's oil capital. And that's the third largest city in all of Norway. And it sounds like most of the folks do pretty well down there. They have less than 2% unemployment, and by some metrics, it's been ranked as the world's most expensive city, so you must have to be doing all right to live down there. All right, this big island here is called Hundvåg, and there's an entrance to a tunnel, which is right about in this area here. They didn't finish that till 2019, so I don't even know if it's done in the sim. At little NavMap at the end when we look at it, we'll check out the satellite map, and you'll see the entrance to it, but it runs back down there into the city, and then runs 6 miles underwater to some land on the other side of it there. It's called the Ryfylke Tunnel, and it's the world's longest and deepest undersea tunnel. And if you want to check it out in real life, it's going to cost you roughly $15 US, which would probably be worth it, just to check it off your list of awesome things to do in life. But in total, it's just under 9 miles long and goes down almost 1,000 feet. And what seems kind of odd to me is there isn't much on the other side. It's not like it's connected to another huge city or anything, just another little town over there. It just doesn't seem big enough to justify doing something like that. I can't even imagine how much that thing must have cost. Look at this scenery. Beautiful. Alright, this next big island we're going to fly over right here is called Rennesøy. And this place also has a couple of tunnels connecting it. There's one running down this way and another one connecting up to this island over here, but they're hardly worth mentioning after that other place. But as you can see, it's not very populated, which is precisely the type of island I would want to live on, especially if it had 2 tunnels. There's a little village right down in the little valley between these two mountains right here that's called Vikvag. Population 1001, which is probably incredibly beautiful. And a little bit further west in this region right down here, there's an even smaller town of Sorbo, and they've got another really old church down there. Most of it's been renovated over the years, but the oldest parts of it go back to 1140. And it's just a little place now, but I think the original stone altar is the only thing that's still left from the original church. Imagine living down there. How beautiful would that be? This is gorgeous. Really gorgeous. Yeah, turn the lights down low, guys. Maybe put a little fire on. It's a good time of year for that. Just enjoy this. Wait till the lights come on for all the cities. It's going to be amazing. All right, we're going to cruise over this way to the southern entrance of the 19-mile-long Karmsund Strait, which splits the island of Karmøy from the mainland. So this is Karmøy out here, and the strait's going to run up through this way here. It's not real wide. It's pretty wide down here, but it does connect all the way on both sides of that island. And all the way down along the southern tip of Karmøy is the town of Håkonshalen, which is right down in here. Which I'm glad I actually turned the time back a little, advanced it a little bit. We couldn't even see it before it was getting washed out by the sun, but that's where it would be right down here. But we're going to cut up this way first, so we won't get a good look at it. That's about 9 miles from where we are now. And that place was first designated a town in 1858, and then they stripped it of that title in 1965 due to some legal fine print. And then, thank goodness, it regained its township in 1996. And apparently it's quite a destination for regional tourists, being voted Norway's best small town back in the 90s. And it's also regarded as one of Europe's best preserved port towns. And apparently each summer they got a big boating event called the Skud Festival. And they set up all kinds of little shipbuilding stalls and exhibits down in the center of town, which sounds like it'd probably be pretty fun to check out. All right, I'm going to jump in the back here in just a second because we're going to check out two more little towns that are called Forsvik and Øren. Both very quaint, and I'm going to hop in the back to see if we can see a big, huge radio mast they got sticking on top of one of the big hills down there. All right, we haven't come around it just yet. Oh, yeah, you can see it. That's the radio mast sticking up over there. And they got a bunch of Viking burial mounds out there, too. I couldn't find where those were, but they said as you're driving through the main drag through town, you can spot them. But apparently at the bottom of that radio mast, we'll kind of hang out back here to it. Ooh, look at this. They've even got the fingerprints on the window. I love that. I couldn't see it before when the sun was a little bit brighter. Really love that. Boy, do you think if they're going to put that kind of detail there, just kind of clean this up a little bit? I mean, obviously you'd only see that if someone's stuffing their face in this hole, so do the whole thing up. And of course the interior of this thing is modeled very well. And you can launch some flares and drop cargo from this thing if you want to. We won't be doing any of that today. I just want to check out this radio mast. So the little development areas where people are living, and it's really small, is right here, and then right on the other side of a little bridge they have going over here, and that's about all they've got down there. And then the radio mast. And apparently that spot's high enough that you can see a lot of stuff from up there. And they got another little bridge over here too, and it looks like they're all really well modeled. They got some massive bridges up by Bergen that we'll check out once we get up there. All right, back to the cockpit we go. So here's where Håkonshalen is, right down in that region down there. So once we get turned around a little bit here, off to the left on the island over here is going to be the largest town on the island of Karmøy with a population of around 42,000, and that's Kopervik. And that place is the central ferry hub for the line that runs from Bergen, which is our destination, back down to the tunnel city of Stravanger, which we just flew over back there. And their big industries out here are fishing and aluminum smelting. And we're about to see the huge facility where they cook all that aluminum. And of course, being the arrogant Americans we are, we're going to keep calling it aluminum despite the rest of the world accepting aluminium as the proper term since officially being accepted as the global standard in 1990. And back when I was really young, we had a Swedish nanny that was living with us back when you didn't have to be rich to have people like that. And she always called it aluminium. And I always thought there was something wrong with her for saying that. I didn't bother correcting her though. And she was very attractive. I always wondered why my mother tolerated that, but even as a 12-year-old, I thought, boy, she's really good looking for someone that's living in your house full time. And she was single. I wonder what she's up to these days. Gosh, she's got to be in her 60s by now, maybe even 70s. All right, so once we level out, we'll see Kopervik down here to our left, and we'll check out the big aluminum smelting place, aluminium. There it is right there. And then there's the main part of town there with all the little ports. And this airstrip over here on the coast is called the Håkonshalen Airport, which isn't really all that big. The runway is under 7,000 feet, but that started life in 1918. Again, very early in the aviation days. And they used it for the Norwegian Navy was using that, being used for civilian traffic from 1936 until they closed it in 56. So originally started off for the military, closed it down for a while, but as the population started to grow out here, they decided they needed something in addition to the one up at Bergen, which is the next closest big airport. So they rebuilt that place in 1974. And that is a big aluminum plant, aluminium. So on this side of it, of the strait up here, we're going to see a place called Håkonshalen, after which that airport back there is named. And the history of that place is all about the ocean, going all the way back to Viking times. The region's ports were a welcome sight for sailors looking for a little break in the weather as they cut south through this strait here. But for the locals, herring was the main cash crop as they worked the fertile waters just off the coast. And Viking kings were kind of partial to this region as well, with the first of them all, a guy named Harald Fairhair, an amazing name, living just a little bit south of town. And there's a big mound up here on the coast, which we can't see from here because it's just going to be too far away, where they have a big memorial on it now. I think it's dedicated to the unification of Norway. And they say that's where that guy's buried. And he had two sons named Eric Bloodaxe, also awesome, and Håkon the Good, not so awesome. And like everything else out here, this place is also turning towards the profits of the petroleum industry. That sunset is amazing. Yeah, if we had the sun up real bright, you'd see some of the defects in the landscape, but this looks really good. I'm liking this, as long as you guys can see it okay. Looks like we had a couple cranes or towers of some kind, maybe windmills down there. So the barrel mound, which I'll show you where that is at the end, and by the way, because I didn't mention it before, as always, along with the add-ons, will be linked in the video description, will be this exact flight plan if you want to take it just as we're taking it. The barrel mound, I think, is right around here. All you'll have to do, once you get into a little NavMap, you can adjust it to taste if you like, is just bring it right into the sim, load it up, and away you'll go. And if you don't know how to do that, I've got a little tutorial video, very brief one, somewhere down in our videos. You can scroll through there and find it. And that thing is rapidly becoming our most viewed video. But I am not going to make this a tutorial channel just to get the clicks. We do what we do here. Only tutorials I'll put up are stuff that's going to help us utilize what we're doing on this channel better. So this thing that we're flying over now is called the Håkonshalen Peninsula. We're coming to a point about 15 miles north of where we are now. And we're going to fly over a few little towns along the way, but there isn't all that much going on out here, so you guys know what that means. It's time for some fun and interesting facts about Norway. So we've already seen the place where you can drive the world's longest undersea tunnel, but Norway also has the world's longest overland tunnel too. Or I guess maybe underland tunnel. So if you look at the country on a map, you'll see it kind of has a fat bulge on the south end of it, and right in the center of that is where you'd find the Lardal Tunnel. That's what that's called. And that thing is over 15 miles long and is part of the highway that enables a direct route from the capital of Oslo out to Bergen, which is where we'll be landing. But out of fear that people might fall asleep from the dim lighting and monotony, they broke it into 3 sections. All of them are underground, but at 3 different points, as you cross from one to the next, it opens up into the natural bedrock, like a big cave. And they've illuminated it with lighting to mimic the colors of a sunrise, help wake you up a little bit. And I will strongly encourage you to find some pictures of that, which is not hard to do. It's really cool. And those same open areas also have some rest stops with some bathrooms and a place to turn around for anyone that might be suffering from claustrophobia. And as you can imagine, carbon monoxide is a bit of an issue in a 15-mile-long tunnel, so it's also the first tunnel in the world to have its own built-in air treatment and filtration system. All very cool. All right, our speed's looking good. Everything's in the green. That's getting borderline there, but I think it stays up there because we have no way to adjust the RPM, so we're just going to let it ride. Well, it's right on the threshold. Norway owns the world's most remote island, and it is nowhere near here. It's about halfway between South Africa and Antarctica, and it's about 1,300 miles away from the next inhabited place, which is another tiny little island, but that one's a British territory. And if you're wondering why Norway has an island all the way down there, well, they were the first ones to land on it. That's when you could get away with that, back in 1927. Fortunately for Norway, it was totally desolate and uninhabited, so they didn't have to kill or enslave any of the locals. But if you look at it today on a satellite map, you'll see that it is completely frozen over. All they have down there is a little weather station right along the coast. And if the ice wasn't on it, underneath it, it's an atoll, like a big opening to the top of a volcanic crater. But it doesn't look like that now because it's all snowed over. Despite covering the entire western edge of Scandinavia, Norway is also the easternmost country, which I was surprised to discover, but if you look at it on a map, you'll see that the northern part wraps around the top of Sweden and Finland, and even shares a small border with Russia. And you might think that such a huge producer of oil like Norway would mean that they are using a lot of it, but in reality, 98% of their power comes from hydroelectric plants out here. And though the country only ranks 9th in the world for a percentage of power drawn from renewable resources, they produce more green energy than the top 8 combined. Alright, the lights are coming on now. So you'll see just how unpopulated it is, and where there is population, it's going to look fantastic. This whole region up here is called the municipality of Fjord, and they got a few little port towns down along the coast without much of particular interest going on. But I did see that this area was the site of a major battle between the Norwegian king Håkon Haraldsson, who is precisely the same guy as Håkon the Good, who I mentioned earlier, and he was fighting with a Danish king named Harald Bloodtooth Gromson, which is awesome. And just to redeem his less than awesome nickname, the Good King enlisted the help of his nephew, Harald Greycloak Eriksson, which might be the most awesome Viking name I've ever heard. And other than all this going down about 1,000 years ago, I didn't know anything else about it. I probably could have dug into it a little further, but I couldn't get past the names. This thing right here is called the Storstoken Airport. Unlike almost every other paved airport we've seen in the world, that one did not start as a military base. They built that in the 1970s and 80s to appease the growing petroleum industry, whose executives were sick of taking ferries out here. Look how great that looks. Fantastic. Really nice. Alright, we've got about 20 more miles of spectacular scenery to enjoy before we hit the home stretch. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this plane. And it's always been interesting to me that a lot of the other big sim channels don't do that. They tell us how to operate them, which is fantastic, and I'm grateful for that. But we really don't get to learn too much about the history of a lot of these planes. So I'm going to start trying to do that whenever we have time, and we have a little time now. So one thing I didn't realize was that Transall is the abbreviated version of the conglomerate of builders who made this thing. The full name is Transporter Alliance, or maybe Alliance. There's a Z at the end of it. And that was a French and German outfit, so they were making the different parts of it at different factories in the two countries. And I'm not sure where they finally assembled all of them, but it was France and Germany that were making these things. And they pumped out the first one back in 1963, and the full production run was from 65 to 85, making a total of 214 of them. Look at that. It's so weird that a lot of these rivers, as if, you needed to have more attention drawn to rivers that look a little funky in the sim, always wind up having these naked spots around them. That happens a lot when you put the snow on. Good grief, look at that. Amazing. Absolutely stunning. So when they were designing these aircraft, the engineering specs required them to be able to carry 35,000 pounds of cargo over roughly 1,000 miles without having to stop to refuel, and they had to be able to land on semi-prepared strips. And if you ever watch any of those documentaries, as I was telling you before about that one, they were doing something at the South Pole. I think they were doing some core sample drilling or something like that. But they left their main base to go out where they wanted to do the drilling, and they flew in one of these things, landed right on the snow. I think they may have attached some skis to it, so it has no problems in rough terrain. And they're designed to land on runways as short as 1,200 feet, which is pretty impressive for something this big, kind of like the Caribou. This thing's a lot bigger than the Caribou. And I couldn't figure out how many of these are still flying, but I think Germany retired the last operational wing in 2021. But I read that Turkey is still using 2 of them for military purposes, at least as of 2023. And I think Australia might still be using some for firebombing. Water bombing. Sorry, this isn't Dresden. And I couldn't see that the U.S. had any of these. In Wikipedia, it showed all the former operators of these things, and the U.S. wasn't any of them. So if you know if the U.S. ever used any of these, let me know. According to Wikipedia, they didn't, which I found a bit surprising, because I felt like I'd seen some of these, but we probably use the Hercules and things like that, which look kind of similar. Okay, so once we get to Bergen, that's where all the action's going to be, and there's all kinds of stuff for us to see, and I don't want to be distracted by trying to check off all my notes as we're going through it. So I'm going to kind of tell you what's going on up there, and then we'll just spend our time looking at everything once we get there. So right now we're about 20 miles southeast of it, and this town that we're going to come up on right along the coast here, which has its own little 1,000-foot runway, at a town called Ulven. But this town down along the coast is called Ossyro, O-S-Y-R-O. But they don't have much going on down there other than looking absolutely beautiful. So we saw the capital in the largest Norwegian city of Oslo on our last flight out here. And we saw the third largest city of Stavanger shortly after our departure. And now we're going to round it out with Bergen, which is the second largest city in the country. And a population of about 300,000, which is not gigantic. And as you're going to see once we get up there, it's surrounded on all sides by mountains. The city itself is right down along the coast. It was obviously built up as a port city originally and still has a lot of ports. But because of the mountains, which aren't huge either, but it is surrounded by mountains, they call it the City of Seven Mountains. And it became a major trading hub around 1,000 years ago, served as the nation's capital in the 1200s, and was the largest city until Oslo beat it out in the 1830s. And if you look at Norway, just looking for any areas that look a little bit grayed out, like there might be a lot of population out there, there is not much going on out here except along the coastlines. Nothing much in the interior of this country. And even Oslo is right at the end of that big long fort, if you remember that flight. So I think this place has been all about ocean faring for a long, long time. But you're going to see a lot of beautiful ships modeled down along its many piers once we get out there. A couple big cruise ships, some transport ships, some fishing ships, which is probably very true to life because this place is Norway's busiest port for both freight and passengers. And there's going to be a few old forts and castles. None are going to be really easy to make out due to the lower lighting and the snow and the angle we have to take to get set up for our approach. But on the southern end of town is a place called Gammelhagen Castle. And if you see pictures of it from the ground, it looks very much like one of those old French chateaus, but it's fairly young. They built it in around 1900. And it's one of the residences of the Norwegian monarchy. And then right along the coast downtown, we should be able to make out the Bergen fortress, or at least the outer walls of what's left of it. And I couldn't figure out when those were built, but there's still several medieval structures that are still standing down there. They got a great hall down there from medieval times, which are probably very cool if you can make it down there. Check it out from the ground. And if we can make it out amidst the snow over the lip of this mountain, we might be able to spot the Brann Stadium, which is also an NSIM mod, and that's the home of the SK Brann Football Club. But one thing we'll definitely be able to see is the colorful top of the Ulkrian cable car line, also known as a passenger aerial tramway, and that opened up in 1961 to take passengers from the city up to the 2,000-foot peak of Mount Ulriken. And they had a little issue in 1974 when one of the cars detached and fell to the ground, unfortunately killing 4 people, and they shut the thing down for 5 years. And I think they also shut it down because of a funding issue for a while, maybe in the 80s. But in 2021, they built the skyscraper and restaurant right at the top of the thing, which is probably just absolutely beautiful. You go up there and check out the city from the peak of the mountain. Look at all this stuff here. And there's a big pond downtown, which I think we'll probably be able to spot, even with the dim lighting. And that's kind of the core of their cultural center. It's surrounded by museums and concert halls and theaters and things like that. And the campus of the University of Bergen is just going to be a little bit south of that area. And their aquarium, which looks pretty neat, and we'll see if they modeled it in the sim. We'll probably be able to see that better once we come in for our final, is going to be on the very tip of the westernmost port that they've got down here. And then lastly, we've got some amazing bridges to check out. Really nice looking. And we're going to have to hop in the back to see the first one. But the first big one is called the Nordhordland Bridge, which opened in '94. And it's the combination variety, where the ends of it, which connects to the land, are the cable stay suspension type. But the middle part of it is set on pontoons. And you're going to see it's massive, about a mile in total length. And to frame that a bit, it's roughly 1,000 feet longer than the Golden Gate. But it's going to wrap around a little island called Flatoy. And then another much smaller suspension bridge connects it to over the little island in the town of Knarvik. And then the last bridge, which also looks amazing, we'll definitely have to try to check out as we're on final, is called the Askoy. It's also a full-on suspension bridge, and that one opened in '89. It's about 1,000 feet shorter than the Golden Gate. All right, so we should see the top of the cable car right up here in just a bit. It'll be hard to miss because it's all rainbow colored on the top of the big mountain up here. Look at that. Phenomenal. Looks like we're tracking pretty well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and come on down to 4,000 feet because we need to be at about 2,500 when we get on our last leg of the final. And we'll come down to 1,000 feet a minute and pull our throttles back just a little bit. All right, so there's the big downtown area here where all the ports are and the university and all that stuff. And the cable car thing should be right. I think it's going to be on the top of this mountain right here. There it is. See it coming into view there? And as we come around that, we'll try to spot some of the stuff downtown. So the royal residence, I think, is right down here in this area. Again, we'll look at it on the satellite map at the end. And I don't know if we're going to be able to see the stadium or not. It's looking a little bit dark down there. I think that might be it right there. Yep, that's probably it right there. It's in that area. Unless we see something else that looks like a stadium. It's lit up like a stadium, but they wouldn't have lights right in the middle of it like that. Maybe that's it over there. But here's where the top of the cable car is. Look at that thing. Beautiful. Can you imagine the view from up there? Oh, look at that sunset. Oh, amazing. Just amazing. 2,000 feet up that goes. And I guess the restaurant's somewhere in that thing too. All right, so you can see some cruise ships down here. There's that pond I was talking about. So they've got their museums and their theaters and all that around here. And then this is where the campus of the University of Bergen is. And their aquarium's going to be right down here. We'll try to remember to take another look at that, but we kind of got to swing out wide to get around here. And on the tip of this one is where the Burghausen fortress was. We'll see if we can see any of the retaining walls. And it's not very well lit. And even in the daytime, it's really hard to tell. It's just on the outer edges of it where you can see them. Man, I'm surprised they didn't light up the cruise ships. Look at that. You can see some ships over there. There's that other bridge. We'll check that out. We should get a much better view of that as we come around. But the big bridge is going to be right up here. We're going to hang out for just a minute. Once we start to turn, we still got a little ways to go. I'll hop in the back and we'll check that thing out. It's going to be right over here. And then, so it'll swing over this way, and then it kind of jumps over that little island there, and then there's that other little bridge that connects to Knarvik. And we're at 4,000 feet now. Our speed looks good, so we'll just leave the throttles where they are. And let's do our approach checklist here. Get the air off. And our prop sync off. And then we'll get our landing lights going once we get a little bit closer. But we're not too far out. Okay, so there's that part of the bridge. Once we turn, I'll hop in the back and we'll get a real nice look at it. I think it's a mile long. And I don't think I remember seeing any other suspension bridges that were just suspensions on the end and then pontoon like that in the middle. I'm trying to think if we've seen anything like that. I don't think we have. All right, let's hop in the back real quick, see if we can get a look at that thing. Oh, gosh, so amazing. Really, really looks nice. Oh, our fingerprints have disappeared, too. All right, I'm going to move my mic forward so I can really lean out that window. So there's the other little bridge, and the big guy should be right down here. There it is. I'm going to lean out and look at it. And it looks like part of it isn't even finished yet. It kind of just dies down there. Maybe that wasn't completed. Unless they have a second part of it that goes into a tunnel, which wouldn't be all that strange, would it? Not out here anyway. All right, so let's check out Bergen again as we come around. So I don't know. I mean, obviously they get a lot of cruise ships out here. And oh, look at that bridge over there. But I know the big, tall mountains on the sides of the fjords are a little bit north of here, so I'm not so sure if this is the biggest cruise stop. I know they handle the most traffic, but for people checking out the fords, it may be at one of the ports a little bit north of here. And I need to thank our friend that gave us that Oslo flight also for inspiring this one. He originally had sent me a flight plan for one that went through more of the interior, which was beautiful, but there just wasn't much else to talk about other than looking at the mountains. But it ended here in Bergen, which was fantastic because I hadn't seen Bergen before, and so I said, well, we're not going to do the interior flight, but we will fly over Bergen because that's awesome. So thank you again to 2B Creations, and he lives in Norway and has a very Norwegian name, and I asked him, hey, how do you say your name in English? And he sent me a little audio file of how to say it, which I really appreciate. But he said, you'd probably just call me Toby in English for short. And now that I know that, I'm wondering if it's not 2B Creations, but it's supposed to be Toby because it's just T-O-B, so thank you for letting me call you Toby, and thank you for inspiring this flight. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and take the autopilot off, and we got to slow way down, and this thing likes to take its dear sweet time slowing down, so I'm just going to idle the throttles as we come down here. You can tell we're a little bit high. That's all right, we'll come on down. And there's the big city and the ports. Looks extraordinary. So again, we've got our Discord server opening up. If YouTube will stop throttling us, man, we loaded up on subs there for a few weeks, and it's just kind of been trickling in now. But when we hit 1,000, that'll open up. And And I was telling Toby, I was like, man, that's such a great flight plan. You know, it just doesn't work for what we're doing here when I need to try to hold everyone's attention for an hour, but I'd hate for that to go to waste. So I think what I'm going to do to inspire other people to try to create great flight plans for us is any flight plans that are submitted that we don't wind up actually flying, I think once a quarter, you know, we'll put them on the Discord page, and you guys can fly them, and then we'll vote on the ones that don't make the cut for uploaded videos, and then maybe once a quarter I'll throw out a little Sim Market gift card or Orbix or wherever you guys want, Steam. We'll vote on the best looking non-uploaded flight and award the guy that, or girl, that sent it in. Alright, gears down, landing lights on, one notch of flaps, and our approach speed is 115 knots, which is still a lot slower than we are now. So once we get down to 140, I'll throw out another notch of flaps, if we get down to 140. So as usual, until we have that Discord server open, feel free to keep suggesting places I need to check out. I always fly all of them. And then be sure to hang on to your flight plans and the notes if you make them, because we'll load them up on that Discord server and everybody can check them out. Don't want to let a good flight go to waste. Alright, another notch of flaps. And once we get down on the ground, we'll pull on over, check out a little NavMap, and see some of the other stuff in the full daylight that we were checking out here at nighttime. And last notch of flaps. And we're still above our approach speed. It is just amazing. This thing is kind of like that Sharp, so you would think something this huge would just slow down faster. Yeah, when I had that add-on installed, which is a pretty good add-on for this airport, it was stuttering so bad I almost couldn't control the plane, so I had to pull that out. If you guys have a really, really powerful computer, you might be able to pull it off. And I was following the Pappies before, and man, I felt like I was going to scrape the tops of those trees, so I am intentionally coming up a little bit higher here. I don't know how accurate those are, because you can see we're pretty low right now, and it's still saying we're too high. So let me just concentrate for a second as we get on down here. And we're going to have to flare for a while, because it'll just hop if we don't. Alright, flaps up, and hit the brakes. We won't even need to use the reversers. This thing doesn't need a lot of runway to get down. Alright, there's a taxiway right there. That works out perfect. Excellent. Alright, landing lights off, taxi lights on. Boy, those taxi lights aren't very bright, are they? Oh, there they go. Oh, look, you can even see the propeller lines in the taxi light there. That's cool. Very cool. Alright, I think there's a hangar right over here for us to pull up next to, so we won't be scooting around here for a long time. Yeah, you can see we're getting a little stuttering now even. This plane must just suck down the CPU. Initially I was flying the 850 again out here, but it was just taking a little too long. Obviously we didn't have too many different things to talk about other than the amazing scenery, so I decided to switch to this guy because he's about 20 knots faster cruising. Alright, where do you guys want to go? Let's pull over here next to this one on the left. The stuttering is going to make me have a seizure. But we don't want to get too close to that gas pump. You know what's going to happen. Well, let's park in this big circle right here. Looks like a good spot. What do you guys think? Alright, let's go through the shutdown procedure, which isn't too complex, but we'll go ahead and do it by the book. Alright, so we already got the AC bleeds off. Anti-ice, we didn't use that because it wasn't very cloudy. Engine vibration off, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, turn off all of our fuel pumps. Let's pull these down to low idle for now, just so I can see everything. And then our condition levers can go to cutoff, and then we'll shut the batteries off. And we might get a screaming warning here in just a second, which I'll just shut off if that happens. Alright, turn all these guys back off. And the battery's off. Sorry about that. Okay. Alright, let's check out little NavMap, see what we got going on out here. And for some reason, my plane wasn't tracking our flight on this time. I may need to have restarted little NavMap, but that's cool. All right, so again, here's where we are in Norway. The border with Sweden kind of comes up here like this, and then it stretches all the way to the north here, wraps around the top, and then this is where, this area here is actually part of Russia. So it does share a little border right here with Russia. All right, so here's where we took off from. Came out over that nice little beach there, which the sun was so bright we really didn't get a look at it. Cruised around this way, came up to this little town right here, which is Sandnes. And this thing you would think would have showed up in the sim, but even on the Google map, that's not there yet. So I don't know if it's something that got torn down, because I think this little NavMap is a little bit aged too, but there's nothing like that there now. So that was probably right for the sim. They didn't miss that. Got a big horse racing track, which you couldn't see because it was too snowy. Here's where that big stadium was, which looked about like that. And here's that big semicircular port, which you'll see quite easily if the snow is not on there. And then here is the downtown area. And here's where that really old cathedral is. Oldest cathedral in Norway. And let me just show you the area where the tunnel goes in on this island. So just to give you an idea of how big this thing is, here's where the traffic comes up for a little bit if you want to get off on this island. And it runs all the way through here, stays underground until it comes out over on this side of the city. So you can see there's where it comes out right there. But look where it spits out on this side. So it goes underwater all the way through over here. I mean, this is a pretty good sized city, I guess. But it spits out right along the coast here. And I don't think this area was done yet because it doesn't look like that's a proper tunnel yet. But the light may just be shining in that way, so we can't see the shadow if it does go into the ground. But if you back out a little bit, look at this. There's really nothing else out here until you get over to Oslo, which is way, way over here. So there's Oslo up there. There was that flight that we took out there. Not much else out there. So that's probably a beautiful drive, but very, very long drive. And here's the town of Håkonshalen. Most best preserved port city in Europe. And it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? That's got to be just amazing to go down there. I bet that's incredible. All right, here's the place that had the huge mast. That was right there on the biggest point in the island. You can just barely see the shadow of it right there. And again, I don't know where the Viking burial mounds were, but here's the two little population centers for that town. Then we came out here over Kopervik with their big aluminum smelting plant. That's this thing right here. Look at that thing, huge. And there was that airport they slapped out there. 1918 was when they first built that. Man, that is crazy. That is really early. Wright brothers flew that first flight just about 15 years before that. And here's Haugesund. And then here is where old Fairhair is buried, they think. And there's that monument on top of it. So I think we got that right, picking out that big naked area in the sim. I think that's where that is. And I don't know if you can see that. There probably at least is the square if the snow wasn't on the ground. So I bet you could probably spot that. But that's pretty cool. We flew way out here, and here's Fjord and the airport that they built for the oil executives out here. Also a beautiful little area. And this is crazy. This much coastal land, and people having been out here for 10,000 years, and no other population really built up. And then here's Bergen. So there's that little town we flew over. There's our tiny little 1,000-foot runway, but it is paved. So you can take off there if you just want to take a low, slow flight out here. And then here's the Royal Palace. You can get a good look at that. Look at that thing. If you didn't know, you would think that was much older than 120 years or so. But it looks beautiful on the ground. And they got a few of those things around Norway where the royals live. Okay, so let's see. I think that we were probably right about where that stadium was, because I was thinking it was up here, and there is a stadium up there, at least a field, but I think we were right picking that thing out down there. It's where all those lights were, but you really couldn't tell it was a stadium for where we were. And here's where the Ulriken cable car goes. Right down there. I got their big restaurant up there now, the Skyscraper. Awesome. Okay, so here's the downtown area here. So there's their big pond in the middle of town, and right here is an art museum. That beautiful looking thing there is a concert hall. They get a big performing arts center here, and here's the University of Bergen's campus down here. And then here's where all the cruise ships were, and here's where the edges of that old fort were, right here. And then here's where that really, really old building is, right here, that little hall. So that's the one that's at least 1,000 years old. And here's the aquarium. In the daytime, it may look like that. You can see they kind of got a unique looking building there. I don't know if that was modeled or not, but I think it probably was, because one of those add-on packs did a lot of landmarks down here. And there's another little, they call it a fortress, but it's just a few cannon emplacements right here. Nothing really to see, so we didn't try to look for that. And then here's the big bridge up here. And when we were looking at it out that window, I mean, it looked like there was something else coming off the side of it here, which does not appear to be in the sim, so I'm not sure what that was. But it looks like there's something underneath it there, so I don't know. I haven't been out there in real life, obviously, so I don't know what it looks like. There was that other little bridge going to that little town over there. It looked amazing. Came over here for our approach, and then got to see the Askøy Bridge, which looked really, really cool. That was great. They had all those lights on it and everything. Just amazing. And then came in for our landing. Really cool flight. Thanks again, Toby, for suggesting this. I wouldn't have come out here if you hadn't sent me that other one, so I really, really appreciate that. Be sure to hang on to your flight plan and your notes. Once we get that Discord server going on there, we'll take some user-uploaded flights and then vote on the best one. Give somebody a free plane. Give them a gift card somewhere. And that's it, guys. Had an absolute blast. As always, learned all kinds of cool things. Enjoyed some amazing sights. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.